Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending where you are in the world. Today's webinar is Impedance Test Basics, what it is, how it works, and how to choose the equipment. Next slide, please. The presenter today will be Clément Sanchez. Clément is an audiologist. He's a product manager in the area of hearing assessment. I'm the moderator. My name is Mariana Rosling Jensen, and I'm an education and training manager at Autometrics. Next slide, please. And some practical stuff about the webinar. All participants are mute, and the reason for that is because of the background noise. It's possible to ask questions during the session, and you can write in the question box, and I will select some questions to be answered in the end of the webinar. If your question is not answered, all the questions will be answered afterwards. So when we finish the webinar, I will write an email to you, and then we will answer you the questions. If you have any technical issues, please tell us and write, and I will answer you. After the webinar, you will receive a questionnaire to evaluate the webinar. So that's the practical tips and tips about the webinar. Clément, welcome, and
yes.
Please.
So I'm very happy to present some tips and tricks about Impedance test basics. The purpose of this webinar is not to describe the Impedance testing today, because those tests actually are mostly known, and so I won't describe what is a tympanogram and what is the purpose of tympanogram, but I will actually explain what are the important parts of a solution, an Impedance solution, that you should take care about or pay attention to in order to deliver the best experience for the customer, but also for your own practice. So, for example, regarding the test we are using today, we can actually divide different packages of tests, as you can find in the products today in the market and from the industry. Basically, we used to distinguish the different packages in 3 segments. The first segment can be called a quick check or screening segment, but also a basic entry level. And usually you will find in the industry and in the market, in this first segment, the basic tests like sweep auto tympanometry, also called, for example, screening tympanometry. And usually in this entry level of tests, you will actually find the frequency probe tone used for adults, which is usually the 226 Hertz, compared to the 1000 Hertz, which is usually offered for infants or kids or babies below 6 months old. But also you will find the reflex screening. So the reflex screening, compared, and just to make sure that we are talking the same language, reflex screening compared to the reflex threshold you can find on the line just below. The reflex screening just will be about sweeping through different frequencies. Basically, you have the 0.5 kilohertz up to 4 kilohertz. So now you can see also a mid-range segment, which can be used as named as diagnostic segment or mid segment. And in this mid segment, usually you find more tests like the manual tympanometry, which allows actually the user to perform the tympanometry with a wheel to adjust the pressure. But also you will find on top of the reflex screening I talked about before, a reflex threshold, and basically you will also find the contrast stimulation threshold, and also a test called reflex decay, you might know. So this test, reflex decay, can be also questioned about its reliability and the needs today in 2016, but it's mainly this kind of packages of tests you will find in the entry-level and mid-segment products. And finally, regarding the test battery, in the high-end segment, or called sometimes clinical, you will find also all the tests I've described before, but for example, you will also get more probe tones like the 678 or 800 Hertz probe tones. You will also find tests for a station tube, and also you can find a test like the BNG tympanograms, or tests like the admittance recorder. This test, admittance recorder, I won't spend too much time on it, but basically the idea is to be able to record the admittance, as the title says, without stimulating. So you can have different applications based on this. But basically the idea from the industry is to provide different packages of tests, and with always a high-end segment providing as much as the company provide. So that's the idea about the different tests. But now you know actually what kind of tests you need in your practice, in your clinical practice, and what is relevant for your diagnostic, or what is relevant for the hospital diagnostic or practice. But let's now focus on what are the main parts of an immittance device, and that's actually the core of this webinar. Something we need to know as a customer, as potential user of new solutions, if you need to acquire a new one. The most sensitive part of an immittance solution is basically the probe. Why is the probe the main important part or sensitive part of such a piece of equipment? It's because it's a lot of technology concentrated in a small packaging. And this probe is also the part which will be in contact with the patient, meaning that this part will be introduced, as you know, in the ear canal of the patient. So a lot of technology packaged in a small housing and in contact with the ear of the patient. Compared to a headset used in audiometry, this patch will be introduced inside the ear canal, so will be in conditions quite tough for any kind of electronic which is miniaturized. Basically, in this probe, we used to find a microphone, a receiver, and also a pressure sensor. So a lot of different important transducers miniaturized and introduced in an ear canal, which can be very hot, very warm, with earwax. So these conditions can actually trigger the quality of the components. So that's why it's the most sensitive part of the immittance solution. So what should we be careful, and what should we take care when we choose an immittance solution is mainly about what kind of probe technology are you using, how big is the probe, how reliable is the probe, and basically what is the choice of your probe. Because you know, as you can see on the picture, on the left side picture, we have a small probe which can be easily introduced, placed, and left on the ear of the patient. In the industry, it's not rare to call this probe a diagnostic probe. Compared to a pen probe, you can see on the right side of the slide, a pen probe was actually more used in the past. Now we are using actually, or we find more small, tiny diagnostic probes, but it also depends of your habits, how you feel with it. The difference between these two probes, of course, obviously is the size, for sure, but it's also the control you want to keep when you do the test. Because the small, tiny probe, most of the time you need to leave this probe in the ear, and then, of course, the control on the sealing, or all the parts which can actually decrease the reliability or break the sealing of the testing are very, very sensitive in the choice or your practice. Basically, some of the users, some of the professionals will definitely prefer to have a pen probe because they can feel that they have a better control on the seating. Some of the customers will prefer the tiny probe. The best way will be actually to have both, and it's available in some systems in the industry in different manners with different flexibility. Sometimes you have to choose one or the other, and the best solution will actually be to be able to have both just available at some point when you need it. So basically on this picture you can see that both probes can be available in different shapes as well. But it's also important when you choose the probe to select different elements which are very sensitive to keep the control of your test. Because when we talk about immitance, if you compare to audiometry, the difference we are talking here about an objective test. And it can be very, very good for many, many users to have an objective test. I know the doctors also really like to have objective results compared to subjective results, of course, because they can remove a lot of factors which could actually decrease the reliability or the accuracy of the test, like how is the patient at that period of time when we do the test? Did he take some medication? Is he tired? Is he sick? And all these factors will change actually the quality of the results. But having an objective test is way better. But on the other hand, when we rely on an objective test, we rely on the machine. We have less control. So we need to find some kind of balance. And to find some kind of balance from immittance solution, we need to have some kind of control of what we are doing. Most of the time when I talk to professionals performing immittance testing, they tell me, yeah, no problem with the immittance solution, except that sometimes I'm not able to reach the seating. And how is it possible? What is the problem? Is it about me? Is it about the ear of the patient? Is it about the solution itself? Or is it my device which is not working properly? And that's actually the main questions we can have with an objective testing solution like in immittance we are providing. So providing the right feedbacks for you to feel in control is very, very important when you select an immittance solution. What are the controls I'm talking about? Is, for example, the light indicators. The light indicators you can find on the probes, most of the time located in back of the probe. Are very, very important for the users. That's very, very sensitive because we know now when the test is performed or is performing, when we have an issue with the seating, when the test is finally done, or even if the test is recorded in the right ear, because you can choose the right ear on the patient, but is the machine controlling or receiving or storing the data for the right ear? So all these elements, they are very, very important to take into consideration when you select the solution and when you select the most sensitive part of the solution, which is the probe. So the light indication, but also the form factor of the probes are very, very sensitive, and you should pay attention to that. Now, why is the probe so sensitive part? For example, here you have what we call an exploded view of a probe. This probe is actually the probe from the Autoflex, the Madsen Autoflex. The Madsen Autoflex is actually a handheld solution, a portable immittance solution with a very, very nice probe. We compared to the former solution, which was the Madsen Zodiac, we have developed a tiny probe with a company called Hortman. Autometrics acquired a couple of years ago. But as you can see, if you go into details of this piece of technology, it's extremely complex, and that's why in the slide before I mentioned the sensitivity of this part, which is the probe. So basically, as you can see on the probe, we have 35 components in a very tiny piece of hardware. This piece of hardware is just a couple of grams. So we are about 4 to 5 grams. and we have 35 components, 9 air connections, and 4 electrical connections. And obviously, when you reduce the size of the probe, but you keep so many components, you can of course increase the risk of lack of stability, problems with the probes. And I'm sure you have experience if you are using the Impedance solutions or devices today in the market. Most of the problems you will face are actually based on are coming from the probe. That's very sensitive part. And as you can see, a large part of the components is made because of the filter. Because I told you before, this part in contact with the ear canal, you will actually face issues from the earwax or humidity or the temperature from the body, and the filters can easily get full of earwax, for example, or liquid from otitis or ear effusion, and that's very important for you to make sure that the probe is reliable. Of course, to know if a probe is reliable, you need to know if this device is providing a reliable probe. But for us, as manufacturer, we also need to take into consideration the size of the probe, decreasing the size to the minimum in order to have a light probe, a tiny probe with a good placement in the ear, but also a probe you can leave in the ear canal, making sure that you won't break the sealing. And by doing that, we need to work on the number of components in order to decrease the weight, but also to increase the stability throughout the life of the device. So you can see that probe is sensitive for you, and it's also very sensitive for the manufacturer. It's a very advanced piece of technology. So as I told you, now you can see the picture. This probe was the one used in the Autoflex. Now another very important part is the probe tip. The probe tip is this part which is coming on top of the probe, where you can plug the ear tip. So the ear tip is this mushroom shaped piece of plastic which will be introduced in the ear, but this mushroom will actually come on top of what we call the probe tip. The probe tip is also very sensitive. Depends, of course, on the test you want to provide, but today we need actually to have a probe tip offering more and more possibilities in terms of stimulation, tone stimulation, probe tone stimulation. It means that it's not rare to use this probe tip for other purposes than just the tympanometry or reflex. It can also be used for OAE, for example, or possibility to develop OAE solutions in the future embedded in the same device. But we also need more consideration when you choose this probe tip. It's very important, for example, for you to go to a transparent probe tip. Why do you need to go for, or what should it be an idea to go for a transparent probe tip? It's because it gives you the possibility to go or to see through this probe tip and to make sure that we don't have the liquid I've mentioned before from the ear canal of the patient, like otitis or ear infusions or whatever. It's very sensitive, this liquid or earwax going through the probe, because based on the slide you have seen before, technology is so sensitive that these elements will destroy even on a short or mid-term timeline. So transparency is quite important. So don't focus on the picture on top right. This picture, actually this 3D picture just shows actually the different canals you can find in the probe tip. But transparency is very important. In Autometrics, we work closely with the company Genui Sound, which is actually working in a very tiny pieces of technology for hearing aids. And this collaboration with our sister company help us to develop solutions which can actually be made in a more easy way, because of the different tools we are using. When I talk about the tools, it's actually the picture you can see on the slide. Those tools are very, very important in the process of manufacturing the components you will use on an everyday basis. Basically, having these tools allows us to design the right prop tip for you. And for us, transparency is not just the only component or part we need to take care when we talk about the prop tip, but also the length of the prop tip. As you can see, having the smallest length as the different drawing, the technical drawing, you can see these technical drawings are just examples we are sometimes drawing when we develop a prop for different solution. It's not just for emittance. It can be used for other purposes. But these drawings, they show that we can actually work on the lens. The lens is of course defined based on the acoustic components we need to provide, and also the lens come on top of the diameter of the prop tip. Basically, for you, the lens is important to actually be able to test the smallest ear canals. And I'm talking about the babies, for example, or the infant. Usually we talk about using a probe tone, which should be 1000 hertz for kids below 6 months old. But you also need to take care of the length of the ear tip, because the ear canal of a kid, of a baby, is way shorter, as you know. So having a prop tip which is too long can be very difficult for the little patient, but also for you to conduct the test. Same for the diameter. Why do we need a small diameter? Is actually to be able to place the mushroom, the ear tip I've mentioned before. So this plastic mushroom piece for the babies, for the smallest ear, you can actually test. So when you choose a probe, don't forget to take a look at the probe tip, which is a very sensitive part as well. So transparency for you to check actually if you have some earwax, some liquid going into the probe, just to make sure that you fix this issue between each patient. But also the lens, having a lens which is the shortest as possible, and also the diameter, just to make sure you can adjust and adapt the ear tips, the smallest ear tips for the smallest ear canal. All right. Here you have an overview of different probes we test, we develop, we take a look at, and you can see that it can vary quite a lot. But basically, it's important to have a probe tip with a diameter between 2.7, as you can see on the Autoflex, up to, I would say, 3.4 or 3.8 millimeters, to make sure that you can actually adjust the right tip and the right mushroom size on it. Now, the second biggest part of an emittance device you need to focus on is also the pump. The pump is quite important if you want to have a fast test, but also constant pressure delivered by your system. Here you have two pieces of technology, and you have the plus and the minus for each of them. On the right side, you have actually the pump technology providing infinite pressure delivery through the system. And this small pump is quite tiny, and it works very well for if you need a handheld or portable solution. On the other hand, having a small pump like this one can actually provide some limitation in terms of reliability, because you know, as for any kind of piece of technology, if you decrease the size of the components or you want to provide the same performance in a smaller housing, you have the risk to increase the reliability. So it's actually very important for you to consider the reliability, but also the capability for your pump to reset as fast as possible, compared to having a portable solution in your practice. On the left part of the picture, you have a more traditional syringe pump technology or piston technology, which offers actually more capabilities in terms of reset the pressure, and also providing a fast fast functionality in terms of delivering the pressure throughout the system. Obviously, the drawback from the syringe pump is the size. But once again, what do you want to choose? Something portable or something faster and definitely more reliable throughout the lifetime of a device, of an emittance device. Basically, we consider in the industry the length or the lifetime of a solution as around 13 to 15 years old for an emittance solution. Okay. And finally, I will finish up with this long slide. I won't go through that all the points of this slide, but the idea now is to consider the hygiene of a solution, because I told you from the very first slide that we have to keep in mind that emittance solutions are solutions which are in contact with your patient and basically introduced inside the ear canal of the patient. So hygiene is also a growing hot topic these years in many, many countries and in many, many facilities. So what you need to take a look, what you need to consider is all the operations you will have to perform or to go through the solutions. How many buttons will you have to touch before doing a TIMP? The best way is just to have an auto start or just click one button to deliver the TIMP, because you need to make sure that you won't touch too many times the device. Also, for example, today we talk more and more about touchscreen solutions everywhere around us. And it's fine when we talk about tablet or when we talk about mobile phone. But now we are talking about a clinical solution in a clinical environment. Touchscreen is definitely something you should be very careful with. Not touching too many times the product, making sure you can clean the different surfaces, making sure that the different components are plastic or silicone-like that you can clean. For example, the shoulder strap you will put on the shoulder of the patient to do, for example, a contralateral stimulation. This shoulder strap, if it's in piece of fabric, definitely you will struggle to reach or to match the hygienic rules in many, many clinics. And these hygiene, once again, these rules are getting more and more important today, in 2016, but also in the coming years. All right. So I'm stopping now for this presentation, and just to wrap up this presentation, just keep in mind that when you consider acquiring a new emittance solution, keep in mind the prop technology, the prop tip, very, very important, the size of the prop, the weight of the prop, but also the pump, what kind of technology is included in my solution. And finally, one piece of features you really need to consider, because it's getting bigger and bigger, is the hygiene and the capability to clean your solution. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Clement. Thank you for your presentation. Now it's time for questions. I can see my screen that we haven't got any question right now. So if you have anyone, you should quickly write something to us, and then Clement will be able to answer you. Clement, I have a question for you. So,
yeah.
Are you saying that we shouldn't use a handheld equipment because of the pump?
It's a very good question. I didn't want to be too strong in my recommendations, because it really depends on the needs in your practice. Basically, I spent a long time with users in many countries, and myself, I was actually a clinician in the past. And portability have never been, and we have also this experience with the Autoflex, which is a portable solution. We actually have noticed that portability is not really fundamental for, I would say, 90% of the users. Of course, if you want to practice some emittance testing at home, or if you want to have home visits for emittance, it's quite rare, honestly. But that's something we need to consider, or you need to consider. But on the other hand, having something portable, you need to know that you will increase the risk of instability. I said that the components have to be reduced to the minimum, as we have seen for the pump. for example, and reducing the components and the housing will increase the risk of instability. And it's not rare to hear, and we also had this experience, that customers are getting unhappy because they have some troubles with the pump or with the probe because it's too sensitive, but also the battery, that's something we need to consider. And finally, the usability. I didn't talk too much about usability through this presentation because it's a huge topic, but usability or ease of use is how easy it is to read the display, how easy to store the data, how easy it is to store the data through that or into a computer afterwards, how easy it is to handle the different functionalities. Is it difficult just to make a tympanometry because everything is smaller with a small screen with just not too many buttons? That's something you definitely need to consider. And I've seen actually customers that they are so happy about their solutions. We have a solution in our portfolio called Madsen Zodiac, which is in the market for more than 25 years. And it's definitely not a portable solution. It's a real classic standalone, very easy to use, a big screen, not too many buttons, and people are very, very happy. When they need to move it, just put it on the cart and change the place with their solution. That's something you definitely need to consider. On a daily basis, I would personally recommend to go for a reliable and easy to use solution instead of portable and fancy solution.
Okay, thank you. I can see that we haven't got any more questions, so Clement, thank you for your participation here. Mm-hmm. You all will receive a survey where we ask you to evaluate our webinar. We will be happy for you to do that. And I see you next time in a month for our next webinar. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.